We've talked about what the inverse function is. In this video, we're going to show you how to find the inverse function for a line. So how do we find this algebraically? We know that the inverse just takes the range and domain and switches them. Graphically speaking, it reflects in the y equals x axis, or line. So the first thing we do, since the domain and range are switched, is to do that. We're going to switch the input and the output, or the domain and range, or in most cases we'll be using y and x. So if I had an example for this, I have my function f of x, let's say, equals 5x minus 20. And I want to find the inverse. Now, using this function notation can get rather tricky, and it isn't always going to be, when we're finding the inverse, isn't always going to be a function, so we won't always use the function notation. Now, an inverse of a line, as we discovered already, will be another function, except for the one line, which is a vertical line, as its inverse will be horizontal, and therefore wouldn't be a function. So many of them aren't going to be functions. So we're going to do away with the f of x and x as far as when we manipulate this algebraically, and the easiest thing to do is to just change that to y. And since step one is literally just switching the input and output, or the x and the y, that's exactly what I'm going to do for step one. So I'm going to change this to x and this to y. Okay, and then the second step is to solve for y. If you'd like, you can add the very first thing we did. I'll call it A. It's not necessarily a step, but it's what we do. We're going to change f of x, change that to y, if it is in function notation. All right, so now on to step two. We're going to solve this for y. So I'll show every step along the way here. So this gives me that y equals x plus 20 over 5. Now we don't typically write the linear equation in that form, but that's okay if you keep it in that form. We usually like to divide each term, the x and the 20, by 5. So when I divide x by 5, that's really just 1/5 x, and then 20 divided by 5, which is just 4. That's usually the form we'd like to see it in. And finally, the last step, once you solve for y, and this is a maybe step, depends on if you have function notation, you're going to switch y back to f for the inverse of the function. So that means I'm going to take this, and my inverse of this function is 1/5 x plus 4. And that's how you find a linear function's inverse.